All right, socials. Welcome to our 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time live on all social platforms. I just got to toggle over to Instagram now and get that going. I hope everyone is well. This is a very anticipated topic with a great title. Um, in the education space, we refer to this idea in a number of ways, but I don't think the idea could be communicated more simply than this question: why people stop hearing each other. So I'm looking forward to discussing this topic because uh, it seems timely to me. It seems timely that people are resigned to the idea that others don't listen. We see examples of that across all the social platforms in what the algorithm seems to present on our feeds: conflict, people aversive with one another, people passionately talking about ideas and thoughts that are important to them, and other people doing the same in a completely non conversational way. Rather, it just seems to be people talking at each other or yelling at each other, even worse. So, let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of why this happens. And then let's put this into some context. The context that I would like you to consider what we're going to talk about today is if you find yourself in a situation where you're no longer being heard or not heard, and how to potentially restabilize or reorient a conversation to where you're drawing the conclusion that you're being heard, even in pieces. Um, it's not unusual in the mental health crisis response space for people to encounter people served who are in crisis, who are already very, very animated in their energy. More often than not, by having experiences up to that point where they were not heard. And in the course of experiencing that they were not being heard, they did what is common sense, natural under those circumstances. They turned up the volume, they turned up the emotional intensity, and they tried it again. And in that, the message gets lost because people are observing before the message the delivery. They're witnessing, their nervous system is witnessing loud volume, what could be a lot of animated physical activity, high emotional arousal, and their own limbic systems, their own nervous systems, are encoding this stimulus as a risk. And as a result, they're not going to hear the message. The message that the person so desperately wants to communicate because they've had experiences up to this point of not being heard. So why do people stop hearing one another? The nervous system is filled with involuntary functions, things that you have no control over initially, that are set in motion by what the senses perceive, by what the senses experience. If I have any desire to be understood or heard, I better demonstrate to the other person who is animating themselves because they feel as though they're not being heard, I better demonstrate that they're heard. This idea is completely antithetical to what people regularly do. If someone were to come into my office right now and immediately begin animating themselves with loud volume, high emotional intensity, the use of language that suggests that they are angry, and then they have a message that they want to communicate, I am initially going to perceive them with risk. That's normal. That's common. That's everyday. Your body is wired to survive. It's not a surprise that impulses are going to start occurring when someone is encroaching on my physical space. And Tony Blauer does an exceptional job of describing in the startle flinch circuitry of the human being. What instigates that is the suddenness and speed of stimulation, particularly what's referred to in the research that he cites as noxious stimulation. But let's, for the most part, keep it as simple as we possibly can. If my nervous system reads risk because of volume, physical animation, suddenness, and speed, it's going to want to do things without direct thought. It's going to want to do things that, unless I try to exert control over them, they will take a life of their own. That's what I think happens in aversive interactions between human beings. Human beings allowing their nervous systems to move the interaction in a direction all on its own without any intervention from myself. How can we start hearing each other? That means somebody has to start getting control of their own emotional state to let the nervous system know in the other human being that their message is being heard. How do we start hearing each other? By someone starting intentionally to hear and listen. By someone deliberately stepping into the space of regulating their own nervous system impulses to listen deeply to what's happening. Well, what happens if what you're listening to is caustic? That's entirely true. You're going to have to manage that. You're going to have to listen to caustic language, caustic energy very often to get to why someone is animating themselves this way to be heard. I can't tell you how many times, either in my personal life or professional life, someone has walked up to me in that manner. Something has happened out in the world, an interaction with another person, some kind of situation, a disappointment, an incident where someone did not feel respect. And then as a result, their nervous system set them into motion. And at some point, they come to me and I'm in a regulated state, peaceful state, doing something, and then this arrives. I understand that when that shows up, that has nothing to do with me. That is helpful in holding on to a regulated state so that someone has an opportunity to regain self-control. If I immediately begin to do anything that lets this person know what's their goal here, their goal is to come to me, maybe to get help, maybe to be heard, maybe to enlist support. If that's their goal and I immediately start with, whoa, take it down a notch, back up, you need to statements, all I'm doing is taking, I wish I had a spray bottle here, All I'm doing is taking a spray bottle of gasoline, if they were a fire, and I'm spritzing it. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The first order of business is to prepare when that shows up to monitor my own nervous system. And if you have to say anything, say something that invites more verbalization. Tell me more. I'm here. I'm listening. In the validation levels of DBT, we would refer to that as listening and observing. I'm going to, as Gary Nesner would say, stall for time so that I can take a few beats, regulate myself to what's happening, orient myself to what's happening, and then engage this person with hearing everything that they're saying or doing so that they know their investment in doing so paid off. The notion that people should not animate themselves this way to be heard is an unreasonable notion. I don't know about you, but I'm witnessing an extraordinary uptick in people starting conversations from a particularly animated state of emotional arousal. And the likelihood is that they are experiencing so many occurrences of not being heard that the decision almost becomes automatic to start the conversation at 100 miles an hour. They have so many experiences on which to base a belief that nobody cares, nobody listens, nobody wants to listen. So I'm going to start at Tomahawk missile level. Does that mean, Andy, you're proposing that everybody has to get better at managing heightened emotional arousal in human beings if we want to start hearing one another and we want someone to listen to what we have to say? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that we're moving in a direction where people starting at incredibly high emotional arousal is becoming normalized. And if we don't demonstrate in the face of that the kind of hearing that their investment in effort demands, and if we start instead with all kinds of conditions around how they're animating themselves, it's going to be a hard time trying to improve things. Somebody has to start. Somebody has to do it first. Well, doesn't that mean that you're abdicating power and authority and sense of self? No. I encourage you to work through your own beliefs about, for instance, why someone has to show you respect. Why? Why is that a requirement for you to do anything? It doesn't mean that respect isn't desirable, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to give respect. I just don't require it unless I'm in particularly intimate, vulnerable relationships with people. One of my favorite theologians, the great Oswald Chambers, who wrote one of the most published and read devotionals of all time, called My Utmost for His Highest, says it this way. He distills the gospel to some very easy to remember phrases. Here's one of them. Never seek justice, but never cease to give it. Think about that for a moment. Never seek justice, but never cease to forgive it. Never cease to give it, not forgive it. You know, when I watch these things back sometimes, I notice that I misspeak more than I think I actually misspeak. I look at the evidence and I'm like, wow, I misspeak more than I actually think I misspeak. That's been educational. Never seek justice, but never cease to give it. Now, that may be difficult to swallow. What? Never seek justice, but never cease to give it? You're not a vacuum. Imagine if everybody did that. Think about the image of that. The image of never seeking justice, but never ceasing to give it. Imagine if two people approached one another that way, offering one another justice, offering one another peace, offering one another deep listening. I'm finding myself interested lately, and I was talking about this with Max Bevilacqua today. If you're not following Max Bevilacqua at Mindful Negotiating, check him out. We're going to do some work together this year. I'm pretty excited about it. Max is fond of starting his trainings with what's known as the prisoner's dilemma. And when he raised my awareness about this, I went on a little research expedition to better understand what the prisoner's dilemma is. And rather than spend a lot of time discussing it, I'll just share the core takeaway, and I will encourage you to look it up on YouTube. The prisoner's dilemma is a theory and body of research that concludes that non-rivalrous collaboration always results in better outcomes. Non-rivalrous collaboration always results in better outcomes. Imagine if human beings didn't pursue justice, but always gave it. What an incredible world that might be. Now, there's malevolence in the world, there's evil, there's tyranny, and the likelihood of reaching any kind of problem-free, evolved state, in my opinion, is pretty low. Notwithstanding that, if we want to understand why people stop hearing one another, we better understand how to start. People stop hearing one another because their nervous systems become activated by virtue of stimulus that has been left unchecked, where the involuntary circuitry in your own nervous system takes a life of its own. How do we start hearing each other? By taking responsibility for our own emotional arousal rather than blaming the world, blaming other people, blaming behavior from someone else, and start recognizing that I have a responsibility to get a hold of my own feeling and thinking before I can expect someone to hear anything that I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this live for the last 18 minutes. I'm really enjoying this StreamYard and being on all platforms at once. This is really fun. Join us this Thursday at jumpstartmastery.com, where we have a live that is particularly oriented toward professionals in the space, and we get pretty deep in the weeds on a variety of topics. And I hope that you've been enjoying our free de-escalation skills sessions on Thursdays. They're coming to a close soon, but thank you for all who have been taking advantage of those. And I wish you peace and wellness today. Take good care.